going to call Murfreesboro City Council meeting January 11th. We're here in the Airport Business Center. This is our workshop, monthly workshop meeting. If you will, I'll handle the prayer and then the pledge. Father, thank you for this day. Lord, I pray that you give us guidance, that you give us wisdom. Lord, that you give us the ability to be able to make decisions that are fitting to the city of Murfreesboro. Lord, as we start this year, we're thankful for the things that you have prepared for this city before us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we'll move to action items. We have the Murfreesboro Gateway amendments to the protective covenants and bylaws. Mr. Travis.
Good morning, Mayor McFarland, members of council. We have an item for you today on the restrictive covenants for the Gateway property. Before the meeting, placed at your locations, two exhibits, one being a 11 by 17 color map, and the other being a list of Class A and Class B members in our association. And so in the late 1990s, the city of Murfreesboro assembled about 350 acres in the area east of Thompson Lane, generally north and south of Manson Pike. That was property that we originally called the Commerce Center. We renamed that the Gateway. And those properties became known as the Gateway Association. We recorded restrictive covenants in January of 2003. Those restrictive covenants have had a 20-year automatic expiration date on there, and in the preamble to those restrictive covenants, our city attorney at the time put a note in there that it was anticipated that those restrictive covenants would be revisited and then reapplied at some future date. As we reviewed this with city administration and city legal and city staff, we felt like those restrictive covenants have served the city well for the properties owned by the city, and that also became the basis for the Gateway Design Overlay 3. These are private restrictive covenants. It happens that the city government is a participant in them, but they really function as a private owners association and private restrictive covenants. And so today we bring before you a request to approve modifications to those restrictive covenants, including a 20-year automatic renewal, and then some other administrative changes that would alter somewhat the authorities of the city as a Class B member and an originator and developer of those restrictive covenants. And then there is one deletion of one section of the restrictive covenants that deals with obnoxious noises and odors, which we propose to delete that because the DRC has approved some specific uses that are in conflict with that, specifically use of outdoor loudspeakers. And so rather than allow that to linger in the restrictive covenants and place it on a future owners association to try to police that, the DRC has the authority to approve the exceptions to that with the approval process, and so we've proposed to delete that specific section. Those are the nuts and bolts of what we're asking you to approve today. What I've given you at your spots in this map is the area generally that would be the master association. The lots that are shaded blue, the city still owns. The lots that are in parcels that are not shaded and have some text in them are actually private sites. Those sites are actually privately owned now and would represent our Class A ownership. There are about 40 Class A owners representing 292 eligible voting units. Voting units are by the acre, and so those owners would represent St. Thomas Rutherford, the Fountains at Gateway, Sunset on the River, Amphitheater, Murfreesboro Medical Clinic, Vanderbilt Hospital, and some other private property owners. And so we have a board meeting scheduled and an owners meeting scheduled for that group on Friday. The city has 293 votes to cast in this, and the mayor and council, as the authoritative body, we're asking you to approve our proposed changes and authorize the city manager to enter a yes vote for the proposed changes for the 293 votes that are eligible for the city. I also included a list of the properties and their voting units, so you have a summary of that. These proposed changes must pass by 60%. If you do the math quickly, the city has currently 293 eligible voting units, which would put us at 50% plus one. So there would need to be some other affirmative votes for the proposed changes to get us up to that 60% threshold. And that math is summarized in this listing for you on the very last page. I think 351 votes is what we need, so we would need about 60 voting units to join the city in adoption of this. We've talked to several of the property owners that are here local just to ask them to consider that and vote in favor of it so we can renew our restrictions and make these minor administrative changes. Be glad to answer any questions and recommend approval to authorize the city manager to enter the votes for the city of Murfreesboro.
Hey, Sam, is parcel D, is that the second phase of the fountains that it's highlighted blue, but?
So there's a smaller parcel, Mayor, just south of parcel D that's about 5 acres. We transferred that in the last, we actually had several property transfers in December and early January, but we transferred 5 acres to Scott Graby, which would represent Phase 2A. We have reserved D and parcel I because we did not transfer those to Scott, but that would be Phase 2B to the south and then Phase 3 to the north, which would be parcel D.
What's the total acreage that we have left on D?
There's about 40 in that. We were at 19, so 14 acres remaining.
Okay.
In there that would be in Phase 2B and Phase 3.
We still have about 45 acres left.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. All right.
And our plan for that, to add a little more onto that, our plan would be for the city to relinquish our role in the owners association at a point in the future after we've transferred most, if not all, of those remaining properties, and to remove ourselves from the active management of that owners association, and then let the board of directors and future owner decide the direction of it.
Sam, I have a question or two for you, but I'll do it after the meeting. It's not going to have an impact, but I wanted an explanation on something.
Sure.
Thank you.
Be glad to help you with that.
All right, any other questions for Mr. Huddleston?
No further questions, I move for approval. Second.
Motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Ms. Averwater? Aye. Ms. Gels Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shacklet? Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. All right, we now have Community Investment Program funds transfer.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. This is a recommendation for reallocation of some CIP funds within existing park projects due to unforeseen circumstances or maybe some reprioritization. I tried to provide as much detail as I could in your narrative and your communication as to where the money would be coming from and where it needs to go. But simply put, the projects are new ductwork at the Patterson Park Community Center, playground installation at the Patterson Park Community Center, St. Clair Senior Center roof repairs, amenities to improve the Central Valley Disc Golf Course, and then scoreboard replacements at Richard Siegel Soccer Complex. It's just adding money to those out of the existing line of Siegel improvements. So I tried to provide you with as much information as I could in that narrative, but I'd be glad to answer any questions that you have.
No questions, I move for approval.
Second.
Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Ms. Averwater? Aye. Ms. Gels Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shacklet? Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. Thank you, Nate. All right, we'll move to item 3, county share bonds revision for school capital projects.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. In September of '21, the council approved the use of $9.7 million in county shared bond proceeds for capital projects and improvements in the city schools. We are presenting a revised plan which has been adjusted to reflect actual cost and a revised estimate based on these approved increased cost. The revision includes the use of $2 million in previously unallocated county shared bonds. The most significant increases were found in re-roofing projects and ceiling replacements. In addition to allocating the previously unallocated funds, we have also identified other funding sources for several projects which we had removed from the list. And we are recommending approval of this revision, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Any questions for Dr. Duke?
So moved. Second.
Motion is double second. Please call the roll.
Ms. Saberwater? Aye. Ms. Gels Harris? Mr. Maxwell?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shacklet? Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. Thanks, Trey. All right, we'll move to workshop items. We have the development impact fee.
This is brought back, we had discussed, the last workshop, the development impact fee, and council wanted to bring it back to include the schools. And so we're presenting that again with the school assessment added to that. Passed out a sheet a little bit earlier that shows what that would generate approximately. This is using estimates on previous buildings, so it will fluctuate obviously when as building throughout the year fluctuates, but that's an estimate or at least a representation of what might create. So if council wants to move forward, the next step would be to prepare an ordinance that would come to council for 2 readings and implement the impact fees. All or part of them as council decides. So happy to answer any questions about those or take any direction. And if we're ready to move forward, like I said, we'll have an ordinance prepared.
In the report, it basically says that in the next 10 years, we really need 2 new schools.
Over the next 10 years, if growth rates keep up, fortunately, Mr. Duke's here, he can probably answer the question in a lot more detail than I could, but that's the population increase, the student increase, it's probably a pretty good estimate.
It says 3226, so to me, that's 3, but I know we're looking at that one on the west side, so that's in addition to that one on the west side.
And so the west side is definitely where the growth, excuse me.
I don't know if you have a microphone there, Trey, come up. Just so the recording pick you up.
Thank you. The west side is definitely where our growth is located right now. We're continuing to monitor our capacity of buildings all throughout the district. When you look specifically at some of our inner city areas inside the really core of the city, Bradley, Mitchell, Nelson, Hopgood, we're not seeing as much growth there. So as we continue to look at keeping up with the growth on the west side, we're doing quite a bit of rezoning to try and move more to those buildings where we have space. We definitely have that need on the west side immediately for a school. Yeah.
Okay.
Craig, I know this study was only good for so long, so if we implemented these numbers, when would the next study be due? Is it 3 years?
3 years generally. There's no hard and fast deadline. It's going to depend on how much we grow. If it looks like that it's not keeping pace, the data that's used to make the analysis is not keeping pace, we might do another data analysis on that. But generally speaking, about 3 years, so you can create your legal nexus to the impact fees is a good rough estimate.
I'm good.
I hate to do this to you, Dr. Duke, but I'm just jotting down my notes in a PDF. So on page, 13 of the report, it's talking about capacity and things like that. General question, if a school is under capacity, Scales is over, overall Creek is over, and Discovery is over, we have a policy, I guess, if there's capacity at another school and the parent is willing to provide transportation to that school, they can, I guess, get an exception and go across town to another school if they're under capacity, correct?
That is correct. I will say with those numbers, because last year the school board did do a rezoning specifically to move students away from Overall Creek and Salem Elementary, which were the two areas where we were at the most capacity. They're still sitting right in those high 90s.
Yeah.
Our school that has the highest capacity right now, just to update that report, is Scales Elementary.
Yep.
They're sitting at 108% capacity. But yes, you are correct. Every year, our board looks at schools that have zone waiver possibilities where they have some open seats. And last year, we actually opened a few more of those schools to allow families to move into those areas. So they do have to provide their own transportation, but we do every year look at each individual school and say, can we allow zone waivers in this building?
The only other just kind of general comment, I mean, is the land. It's competitive. It's hard to find land. I'm going to say it's safe to say you don't want to get an elementary school too big. You probably want to keep it at a certain size. I mean, we got high schools in the county that are 2,000 plus, but an elementary school realistically from a cafeteria standpoint and bathroom standpoint, 1,000 students max roughly.
That's the last few we've built have been at 1,000 student capacity. I will say our buildings have gotten better over the years. So I'll use Salem. It's the latest building that's been built. Its capacity is at 1,000, and that still includes those core rooms for things like English as second language classes, special education classrooms, and things like that. I will say 1,000 is a very large elementary school. It's what we're used to building here in Rutherford County and in Murfreesboro City. It's definitely manageable. You do want to be very careful going above that size for an elementary school.
And just from a capacity standpoint, going back, I would say most from a capacity, you've got some that are smaller in nature, like Discovery and Hobgood and some Mitchell Nielsen. I mean, it's cost effective to add on, but again, you don't want to go too high in terms of the overall capacity.
We have done that. You're exactly right. You can look at places to add on specifically, and let me go back. Black Fox has received an addition. Several other schools have received additions. Bradley is an example that received an addition. But as you pointed out, the issue is once you get above a certain student count, it becomes about can we get them all in the cafeteria?
Yep.
Can we get them in the gymnasium?
Yep.
Do we have to hire more music teachers now to get them through those specific things? So that's what we really try and think about, that 1,000 student, where we can keep it at that number and then operate the school in an effective way.
Yeah, no issue. I think the methodology on the studies sound. I did have one question. It's probably more for Craig. It was around on page 17. It talks about the 2.84%. What if that goes up, I guess? They're taking a 2.84% to come up with that, I guess, figure.
That's right.
Oh,
I'll go by this.
yeah, if it went up substantially on the discount rate, then it would affect, their estimates into the future. So we'd have to, actually, if it went down, right? I have to look at what they're, so if it varied, let me just put it that way, if it varied substantially off that 2.84, then we'd have to take a look at it.
Okay.
Yeah, generally, I think what they're heading for is the discount rate that's somewhat comparable to our cost of borrowing.
Okay.
And that's relatively close, and it's gone up, obviously, but still relatively close. We haven't gone to market, so we don't know exactly what it would be, but we're not too far off that.
I've got no issue with it. I think it's a fair methodology how they arrived at it. I'm glad Sean brought it up last time.
So what's being recommended? I know we've got our spreadsheet here, but what's the decision that the council needs to make?
On the council communication, you'll see the chart, and if you focus on the one to the furthest right where it says the total, that incorporates a total of the impact fees relative to what Smyrna's charging or ours, whichever is less. And so that whole total would be the possibility of what could be assessed on the various different types of development. So the request to council is, do we want to incorporate all the different fees into each of those land use types? And if we do, we can, like I said, draft an ordinance to that effect and put that before council at an evening meeting. And if council wants to have further discussion then, we can certainly do it then.
You know, my overall comment, just on the overall, when you look at roads, 2395, and I'm on, I can't see the page number, but it's that fee schedule. And then you've got parks. I'm looking at just pure single-family detached, 2395 for roads, 3659 for parks, 1230 for public safety, and then schools, 3448. Personally, I would like to see the public safety bumped up, if that makes sense.
Is that our max on public safety, or is that scaled back?
On public safety, the only max on there is the office and industrial. Those are our numbers for our study are the highest numbers on there. The others for single-family, multifamily, retail, and public institutional, we adopted the lower numbers comparable to Smyrna, but they could go to the maximum, up to the maximum of what we've developed in our report.
If we wanted to raise the public safety, would we have to knock something back?
No, because it's done by land use type, and so you wouldn't necessarily have to do that. You could adopt the maximum on any of those for that particular land use type.
I could get behind that too, Austin.
Yeah.
So if I understand you right, so the single-family, multifamily, retail, and office would all go to the amount that was calculated in the analysis for Murfreesboro.
I'm okay being higher than Smyrna. I'm biased. I think we're better than Smyrna.
You write that.
But I'm okay being over Smyrna. I'm with Austin. I'm good raising the police and fire one, and I'm good with the schools since we have a school system and Smyrna does not. So I'm good with it.
Yeah. I'm good with it. I'd like to see the public safety come up, so I'm aligned with Sean.
So Craig, are we saying that these are the max of what we could charge, and then now the council's got to decide on what the overall amounts need to be?
Right, those are the maximum, well, they're the maximum of either ours or the highest that Smyrna charges.
Okay.
So, yeah, council could go up to the maximum fee that's shown on the chart for the city of Murfreesboro. If we increase, for example, public safety, and we use the city's numbers instead of Smyrna's numbers on the categories that Smyrna was lower than what our calculated analysis is, the increase would be $23.88. So the fee would increase by $2,088 overall. Single-family dwellings, $631, multifamily, $416. Retail 300, and institutional would go up by about 1,000. So if you look at the total over there for max fees, it would be about $600 higher than it is now shown as the maximum fee. So that would be about 8,000. I'm doing math publicly in my head, which is really dangerous.
Each one of those roughly, Craig, or
Well, 600 for the single-family detached.
single family?
Yeah. If you went to public institutional, it would go from 1,454 to about 2,454.
Sounds good.
And that's per 1,000 square feet. The single families per dwelling, so you go up $600, about $600 per dwelling.
I want to make sure I'm writing this down. So the recommendation would be roads would be $22.39? Is that right?
So roads would be, are you just talking about?
Single family.
Single family?
Family, yeah.
Yeah, roads would be, well, we use the lower fee between the two cities, $22.39 would be the roadway fee.
Okay.
For multifamily, per dwelling unit, it would be $1,274.
Right.
And for roads, it would be $1,264 for office, $1,037 for public institutional, and then industrial would be $644,
Okay.
1,000 square feet.
Then parks would be $1,032 and $842.
Correct.
And then public safety would be 12, we would use our numbers.
We would just use all of our numbers under max, yeah.
Okay. And then schools,
And schools, Smyrna doesn't do schools, so it would be our numbers there.
How's that compare overall to Franklin, you're saying?
I'm adding up here.
How did they get their number for schools?
What's the total in public safety?
So the total would be $79.49, is that right?
Right, $79.49 for single family per dwelling unit, multifamily $5,027 per dwelling unit, retail per 1,000 square foot would be $4,129, office would be the same, public institutional would go to $2,457, and industrial would be the same.
What was single-family, multifamily?
Single family, $7,949 per dwelling unit. Multifamily would be $5,027 per dwelling unit.
Could you explain a little bit about how they got the number for schools?
Well, that would be in that report that was attached, but
sorry.
generally, yeah, that's okay. Generally speaking, it's a projection on how the schools have grown and the demand for school capital projects future based on the growth in the school population. And with that, they would back into how many, say, new schools would be required, and then do an estimate of what it would cost to build that new school. And then that would be,
What the cost they have, because we saw last night in our CIP what the cost of the new elementary school was.
yeah, cost went up substantially. It has settled back down a little bit, and you can see that actually in some of Darren's numbers on his sewer developments. They've come back down. They're still higher than what they were, but they've come down somewhat than they were, say, 4 months ago, when it was really difficult to get a grasp on how high they could go. So that's what we're looking at. Would it be higher? Remember, this is to, kind of assess on to new people moving in. The city would still go about, this is a revenue source. So it would be put in the pool. And then when the project comes about, we'd figure out a way to finance it. So this is helpful. It doesn't necessarily need to tackle the entire problem all at once, because it's almost impossible to do that because you're projecting into the future. And you have to come up with a number that's current, which is a discount rate that Councilmember Maxwell asked about. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. The report creates what's called a legal nexus, so that the number's justified. Up to the maximum, it can always be less, and if it's less, then the city figures out a way to finance the difference.
So Craig, if we went in at $1 per square foot, we can do a reassessment in less than 3 years, or we got to wait 3 years, or we could do it in?
You can do assessment anytime council desires. Yeah, there's no hard and fast rule on the reassessment or how the fees would be adjusted, other than to make sure that it's done so you have a legal nexus and you can defend it in court if it were to come to that.
Okay.
We're just tied to the maximums off this study until the new study is done, correct?
A new analysis, we could do an analysis without doing a complete study again, because we have a lot of the data, so we'd feed it in there. So it's a little bit short-circuited when you go into the future, since you've tackled the problem in the beginning. But yeah, that would be the number that right now we have a nexus for.
Right.
So, and I would say to Councilmember Wade's point, there's lots of ways to do an assessment. Per square foot is one way certainly to do it, and the numbers can be calculated in that manner. Per dwelling unit, that's using an average of what square footage of a dwelling unit is and coming back to the number. So the analysis involves a lot of different factors, and those factors, as long as they're legitimate and substantiated and getting to the ultimate numbers can change. So you can come up with a lot of different ways. And cities have come up with a lot of different ways on how to make the assessment to help substantiate or that's substantiated to cover the costs in the future.
It says in the report, and this is just, I guess, for everybody's knowledge, it just says the reason the cost is not divided by the 10-year horizon is that the projections reflect their recommendation that the impact fee report be updated every 5 years in order to keep up with evolving demographics and changes in cost. But we can do that every 3 years if we wanted to.
3 years, we could do it every year. We need to pay someone to do it, frankly, because we need to have an independent analysis of it, someone that is an expert in doing it that could come in and testify if we're faced with it. The exercise is really substantiating it from a legal standpoint. So if you're going to go through the exercise, you want to make sure that it's valid and can be used for the purposes it's intended. We could do it at any point in time. So we're just looking for direction if we want to move forward with it, put it on an agenda. And like I said, there can be further discussion, certainly, at the agenda. That this doesn't foreclose any of that. There can be more consideration given before we take that next step.
I would say put it on the agenda for next Thursday.
Yeah, I would too.
I'd like to see a clean sheet with what we hand scratching. I'm not sure I understand it, so.
Clean sheet of
this, what we've been talking.
With the changes for public
Changes
safety.
that we've talked about.
Oh, yeah, the change, sure, yeah, that's the other one that's on there. Yeah, this is merely a projection, and this would vary substantially depending on how much development we actually do in any given year.
That'd be
But
good.
the actual fee, that would be incorporated in part of the council communication for the ordinance. Okay.
Good.
Next Thursday. Or
Yeah,
sooner, coming to a council meeting.
right, coming soon.
Okay.
We'll move to the 2022 sanitary sewer allocation report. I'm sorry I skipped you. I was working off a different agenda.
Okay, I like the change. I like to get confused every now and
Which is what my wife says I do a lot of times. Off my own
He's ready to
agenda.
go all the time.
Glad I had my lunch before we discussed all this.
Yeah, this will be a good
But
snoozer
I'm not
here.
the only one working on it.
So my attempt at a joke, right? Winston Churchill on Russia says it's a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. And that's kind of these sewer reports. It's a flush wrapped in a rainstorm inside a season. If you get confused by this stuff, I kind of understand it because It's rain-related, and if we have wet years, dry years, a lot of things fluctuate. So, real quick, and I know a couple of the councilmen are new, so I'm going to maybe go a little bit longer than maybe I did last year. As I said, these things get refined year to year, so hopefully they get, this is our third annual. It was based on the sewer allocation ordinance that was passed in December of 19. I can't believe it was 4 years ago. But so you got assets right inside the fence, water resource recovery facility. We call that the bucket. And then outside the fence, you have your pump station, pipes, manholes. That's the pipes or the straws that flow into the bucket. The way it works, we all are connected. Most people in Murfreesboro are connected to the sewer. So the pipes convey the raw sewage. Those pipes are expandable and very expensive to expand. Our wastewater treatment plant, or WRF, is expandable. It's also very expensive. We did expand it in 2017 for north of $40 million. The only thing that we've got in Murfreesboro that makes us a little unique is the West Fork Stones River. It assimilates the treated effluent. The river's obviously not expandable. So that's where we run into a lot of rubs with the regulators. This is a graph that kind of shows the months on the bottom, x-axis, and flow on the y-axis. And I just for illustrative purposes, you can kind of see the green line. That's our kind of our dry month average flow. Compared to in the winter, we have a significantly higher flow. For example, when it rains in December or January, we know that the soil typically stays saturated. You don't have any of the plants or the trees evapotranspiring the water that's in the soil, and it just, we get a lot more flow into our streams. So in 2020, that difference was about 2.8 times average, winter versus summer. It was about 530 gallons per day per connection. In 2021, we saw a pretty dramatic decrease. That's 2.3 times, or 420 gallons per day per new connection. And 2022, we're back up to about 2.6, or 490 gallons per day per connection. And what we're calling a connection is basically it's an apartment, a townhome, single-family home, commercial establishment, food service establishment, or retail shop. So it's pretty wide range, but we've got to play the averages when we do these calculations. So we currently have about just over 78,000 sewer connections. 2/3 of those are residential or commercial food service. 1/3, or just almost 26,000, are apartments. So we do spend a lot of money. I come to you routinely with about somewhere between $3 and $5 million in capital project requests to basically keep water, extraneous water, rainwater, groundwater, keep it out of the sewer system. You can see when we normalize this to rainfall, that sewer rehab's paying off. So the less water, the less water we're letting in from groundwater and rain events, it helps us with our capacity to tie new connections. The state regulators really want to see that we are working hard to regain capacity by eliminating extraneous water getting into the sewer system. So right now, I call this our as-is condition of our sewer system. We've got to go, all sewer goes through one of 3 pump stations. There's a main pump station at the WRF, there's the Overall Creek pump station, and then there's the Southwest Regional pump station. What that looks like from a diagram is kind of, you can see certain basins flow into downstream basins. And this is kind of the capacity, available connections. Pink is less than 1,500, and then you can see the yellow, the light green, and the dark green. So you can kind of see where we are from a standpoint of available connections per basin. There's 18 basins that we track. We've got flow monitors in the sewer system that are keeping track, constantly monitoring flow through the system. And the rule is that you can take an upstream capacity and give it to downstream capacity, but you can't take downstream capacity and give it to upstream. So we've got a 2B, well, this is as is again, I'm sorry. That's kind of geographically how it looks. And you can kind of see on the west side over here where we are experiencing a lot of growth, we have some pink, some low connections available. That's being rectified as we speak, honestly. This is where I talk about a 2B condition. Still have the 3 main pump stations here, but we're adding a 4th. This is a future Northeast Regional pump station. That would add some capacity, and I'll show you where that's located here in a minute. And we are expanding the Overall Creek pump station. So this is what the 1 of 4 pump station diagram looks like. That's the $57.5 million price tag associated with that, with those up to get that 2B condition. And you can kind of see that's the Northeast Regional, what it does. So you can see this is the 2B condition model, and you can see a lot more green, right? So I'll go to the next. This is the 57.5. That gives us an additional 21,716 connections, or a 26% increase from current as is. And I just kind of, I put the two together just to kind of see, you see some maybe pink and yellow versus dark green, and I mean, you can just see that there's that $57.5 million, it puts us into a pretty good condition compared to where we are currently. But from a geographic standpoint, you can see it does. It really helps that Overall Creek west side of the interstate where we're experiencing that high growth. So it gives us that extra capacity that we need. This is kind of the bad news. Last year in 2021's report, we said it was only going to be, we thought to get to the 2B condition was going to be about $47.4 million. If you kind of keep your eye on I think it's in the center, that $8.5 million number, that goes to 14. So that number went up. And then you've got the WRF. We went from 5.8 to 9.1. That's an estimate. Overall Creek went from 12.3 to 13.6. And we're keeping the Northeast Regional at 20.5, but we're talking about moving it farther west. So in 2022, now we're talking about more of a $57.5 million in upgrade. So it's about $10.1 million over what we estimated last year. And that has a lot to do with just construction costs going up. There's a lot of work right now, labor shortages, supply chain issues, you name it. We did add some, and I'll show the numbers that turn to green. Those are actually under construction, the Overall Creek pump station upgrades, and then the Salem Highway Sewer Interceptor that was recently approved by council. The WRF and the Northeast Regional, those, I'm changing those to yellow. They're under design, so their design has been funded, but those are still just estimates. We have not bid those. Those numbers could change as we get further into the design. So try to look at a trend here between 2020 to 2022. You can kind of see what I call non-apartment connections. These are single families, townhomes, food service, commercial. You can see a 3 and a 2.5% growth. Apartment growth, a little less than that, less than 0.5% and just under 1% over these last couple of years. Now, what these last ones are, these are non-apartments approved. These are actually non-apartments that have been approved on paper by the Planning Commission. They haven't been built yet or connected to the sewer, but we do it's a lot of work, but we do try to keep track of kind of what we've booked or what we've approved on paper. Apartments, you can kind of see where we've gone there too. So a lot of work goes on throughout the year by planning staff, by water resources staff to kind of keep these numbers updated so we know where we are with regards to what we've committed to. And when I say committed, what we've approved. There's a little bit, they got to put some skin in the game to get a commitment to sewer. Real quick too, these are the total connections right now. You see we're at about just under 75,000 in 2020, and we're over just north of 78,000 in 2022. The approved connections, it dropped a little bit this last year to 7,389 versus the 8,600 because we dropped off some 2015 projects that, they're 7-8 years old. We finally said let's drop off 2015 and just keep the projects that were approved since 2016. Some of those 2015 projects are still on there because they are entitled, I think, through a PRD or the land rights. But those are the totals you see. And then What we have is the as-is available connections. We have about just under 50,000. That's if we don't spend any money at all. If we spend the 57.5 million, that bumps it up to almost, 71,642 available connections, which is that 26% increase. Where we see the growth, I just do this slide here. This is in the Florence, the Blackman, and the Salem Highway area. That's the high growth areas. That accounts for about 57% of the approved sewer connections since 2016. No big surprise there. 20% of the approved connections are apartments. The executive summary. So we're in pretty good shape, and our sewer rehab is paying off. We have approximately 7,389 connections that have been approved by planning department since 2016. We still have a 58% available increase. That's that 49,926. That's assuming that those 7,389 approvals will connect. This is what I kind of say, the majority of these are approved connections have not secured a will serve letter, all right? So they have not put a deposit down that has secured a commitment to sewer capacity. These are just approved by planning. There is another process, or they have to put 10% down of their connection fees to get a 30-month commitment that we would give them sewer. So putting in $57.5 million gets us another 21,716 connections. That's that 26% increase. We do have the ability at the wharf right now to handle the hydraulic flows with the increased connections, but we're going to be marginal in meeting some discharge permit limits into the river, unless we get some expanded limits here in the next permit cycle, which is 5 years from now. There's still some hot spots. There's always going to be little constrictions or bottlenecks in the system that we try to identify to the development community, and they need to come talk to us about those. And then a lot of the sewer connection capacity is centralized to the city and doesn't necessarily support extending sewer farther out into the city's urban growth boundary. So these are just kind of some to show you where we're at. This is the as-is versus the to-be side-by-side comparison. This is the overall creek, the Blackman, and the Florence area. This is the Cherry Lane. There you see the airport and MTSU. You can see where we can kind of picking up some capacity here with that Northeast Regional. This is the, I guess, the Joe B. Jackson Salem Highway. We really don't pick up any capacity here. We pick up capacity in the Salem area because we're increasing that sewer interceptor, but since it all feeds to the Southwest Regional Pump Station, that's a new pump station that was built in 2017, 2018. It's still, that capacity doesn't really change at the pump station. And then you can say the downtown and the Med Center area, again, that all directly flows to the plant, and we've got the capacity available there. No real change in the capacity. So the main takeaways, we are upgrading the Overall Creek Pump Station. That began in spring of 2022. We're hoping to have that by late 23 or early 24 completed. The Northeast Regional Pump Station is anticipated to be moved to the new Cherry Lane alignment between State Route 840 and Memorial Boulevard to better serve this new gateway and development corridor. Our wet weather capacity upgrades at the wharf are critical. Design of those upgrades were approved in the summer of 2022. We need to monitor our county farm pump station a little more to make sure capacity in that model, we've got more capacity than what's currently indicated. And then we're continuing to work with TDEC, seeking our new dissolved oxygen standard, which will be pivotal or foundational to receiving our NPDES permit, our new NPDES permit. So, again, I know that was kind of fast. Maybe it wasn't fast enough for some of you, but it was. That's cramming a whole lot of information, a whole lot of numbers into a fairly short amount of time. But I'm available for questions if you have any.
Last sentence there about TDEC. Could you give us kind of a little bit more information on that?
Yeah, I'll bring up my hidden slide, thinking that was something that I figured somebody would ask. If you see the dots across the top, that's our projected flow increase. The the light blue block where if I can show it here, we're at 24 MGD capacity right now. You can see we get to a real close point where our projected flow and our current plant capacity are almost on top of each other by 2030. We really need a plant capacity or increase at 2030 in order to carry us out to 2048 again, so that'll probably be somebody else's problem. I hope if I'm still around at 20. So we've got to apply for our NPDES permit by 2026 and hopefully receive it by 2027. If we get it by 2027, we need to start construction to have the plant increased by 2030. So we submitted comments on the triennial review at the end of 2022 to request a dissolved oxygen standard increase. That has to happen to get new permit limits. We're trying to meet with TDEC in the next month or two to they have not responded to our requested increase, so we want to put a little pressure on them to say, look, yes or no. If they respond no, then in talking with our outside legal counsel, we probably need to start engaging our state delegation and introduce potential new legislation in the 2024 session. In order to meet these milestones, that lines out. There's no reason, technically, we've demonstrated technically that TDEC should give us the new DO standard. It's inconsistent with all the other Southeast regional states. Our fish and water quality support expanded limits. We have a water quality model that demonstrates we actually improve or enhance the stream the more effluent we put into it. So for them to say no would really be kind of arbitrary. I mean, it would just be, I don't want to say arbitrary and capricious, but that's some other legal term maybe. So we will have to challenge them on that front. And it may not be just that we challenge them legislatively. We may have to go to court as well. So, hey, that's for the lawyers to decide.
You're saying we need a new plant by 2030, whether they change that dissolved oxygen standard either way?
Right.
Okay.
They're saying right now that the dissolved oxygen standard in the West Fork goes below the state standard. We've demonstrated to them that the state standard is too restrictive. It's more restrictive than any other state, and that the current ebb and flow of the DO in the stream, the fish and the macroinvertebrates are not affected by those intermittent and sporadic dips in dissolved oxygen. So we're just saying, look, give the West Fork its own specific DO standard based on the data and the studies that we've done here. Quit applying a blanket approach, from the state, and that means they've got to agree to it, and then we've got to go talk to EPA about it. And EPA is not opposed to it, but EPA back in 2008 said they needed more data. Well, that's what we've done. We've got more data to give them the opportunity to give us a new standard. So I think we've done everything right. We just got to get some regulators to get out of the box or get off their current checklist, whatever you want to say it.
Darren, the only question I've got is that area kind of south of town, it's what, 12 Alpha?
Right.
And 14?
Yeah, that's the, yes, where we're showing it has zero capacity now and only limited. This is the Buchanan, and so we have a pump station here, and I don't have it labeled, but it's the County Farm Road pump station.
Okay.
It has the capability, and we've got, I think on the money, we should have, it's about $250,000 to upgrade that.
Yeah.
We're currently handling all the flow coming to it now. The model, obviously, it's just a model, so sometimes it's telling us we don't have the capacity, but we're not having any overflows, and the pumps are handling it. But there is a fairly inexpensive way to upgrade those pumps to, and I think with the Buchanan area, 14,
Yep.
that's going to have very limited sewer connections, since we've kind of said, if you're not inside the city, if you're outside the city, we're not interested in connecting you to the sewer.
But the bulk of the improvements will go to the west side.
Yes.
if I had an inverted Pac-Man, it'd be like 12 and 14 would be in the mouth. They're not getting as much. The rest of it's going in a crescent moon around the city. Right. Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Darren.
Thank you guys very much.
Always good to get that information. All right, we need to move to fiscal year 23 mid-year financial report. And I don't think Erin has a presentation, but she just wanted to, I wanted just to say, looking at the report, it looks like all of our revenues are above what we had budgeted, and expenses were down 6.7 million, or 7 million on what you had budgeted.
Are you talking about for this year or for last year? For this year?
For your, yes, for your fiscal year 23.
So we are showing that we should have significant savings in budget, primarily in payroll. Revenues are strong. Sales tax mainly is the area there. Development revenues are down compared to last year, but we did budget a dip there. So we'll just have to see how the second half of the year falls out to see if we'll meet budget yet. But we did expect a drop as compared to 21 or 22, I mean.
Any questions for Erin? Any questions on the 2022, or the November 2022 dashboard? All right. Any board and commission appointments? All right. Any licensing?
Today.
Any statements to be made?
No, sir.
Any other business from staff?
Yeah, I have one. Sometimes there's a phases of life that come upon us, and we have one individual who's reached that phase of life, who's been to many council meetings, and this is his last, if we can help it. Years.
He doesn't look sorry.
Mr. Whitaker here has his retirement plan for the 17th before our next meeting, so I thought I'd bring that up and recognize Gary for his, how many years? 35. 35 years. That's enough for anybody. I only did that because I know he hates us so bad.
So we can still get our licks in until the 17th.
You got it, yeah. There's no plan to stop on that. Congrats.
Congratulations, Gary.
I would like to thank the council and the city for all the opportunities that they have given me over 35 years. Some I asked for, some I didn't. I never remember asking to be the planning director, but it was bestowed upon me. Greg did ask me if I wanted to come and be an assistant city manager. I'm glad I did. I think it would make a big difference in our city. But I'd be remiss to not say none of this had anything to do with me and all it had to do with the people that work here. It's probably one of the best cities. I've traveled a bunch, and there's nothing like home. And you guys, along with the employees in this city, it's been an honor to work with y'all and to be a part of this world. So please, thank you for being involved.
We're proud of you.
It's Gary.
Thank you, Gary. All right, any other business from staff members? Any other business from the council? We are going to adjourn the meeting, but then we're going to need, well, actually, we will not be adjourning. We're going to reconvene into an executive session for potential litigation, and then so we'll convene next door.